Hi, welcome to the fourth episode of What's Ahead for Framingham. I'm Geoff Epstein, the host, and it's being captured here at Access Framingham, who are a wonderful crew helping to get information out to the city, and particularly for the election. So, as I said, this is the fourth episode. The other ones we've had three before, of course. The first one was on difficult conversations and how to manage that in relation to my name and other things. The other one was campaign finance and the state of the schools, which are very important issues in the election. And then we had an episode on everybody's favourite topic, the water and sewer system. And we, in all of these, tried to lay out what the real situation is in Framingham as compared to the story that's being told by the Mayor's campaign. Now, this episode is a bit of an omnibus episode because it'll be an update on the staffing crisis we're having in the schools, namely focused on principals. And then I'll talk about environmental efforts in the city, which actually have amounted to almost nothing in 4 years, but I can talk about what should have happened, what's happened in the past, and how we can do much better in the future. And the final thing will be about the decision culture in the city, where it seems to me that there's a lot of problem hiding going on here. And I've kind of worked in different companies, and some companies do really well and others don't. And the companies that do well in the private sector are the ones who are kind of always interested in what the problems are and how to solve them. And the other ones have some kind of hierarchy built up and personal relationships dominating, and they're not doing too well. So what we have is that in Framingham we have a government that's not transparent, not very open, doesn't like to talk about problems, whereas any good organisation is focused on problems and solutions. So episode 4 is talking about staff turnover, environment, and problem, how you discuss problems, which is not often talked about. So that's the basic thing here. The thing is, what's the situation with staff and staff turnover? And since the last episode, I've been talking to some teachers about this, and it's certainly the case. A lot of staff are leaving, and a lot of the reasons are because they have poor classroom support and they have language problems, but it's not just classroom aids for language, it's classroom aids for special needs. So, you know, if you have 5 special needs students in your classroom and you have support for half a day a week, it's not really very good, and it makes teachers lose morale, and they find it difficult to manage those kids and to manage the whole class. So there's a real problem with classroom aids and classroom support that's helping drive the problem, apart from pre-K and late buses. So the update on the staff turnover is, just to recap last time, or the time before last, episode 2, we have absolutely rock solid. There's 200 teachers, experienced teachers, have left in the last 2 years. So there's very high turnover there, and we are losing the experience base in the school system right now, and we have to turn that around. The other is the quality of the classroom aids, where we have high turnover. 25% of them leave every year, and although they are often people who are looking to advance their careers, and there's a normal turnover, just like retirements for teachers, it's much higher than normal, and it's because their pay rate's 20% too low, and so we get poor quality aids, and often they're hired and then fired a couple of months later. So again, the poor aid support is confirmed by teachers. But I want to talk about principals, because the other day I had a bit of a fight on Facebook where I kind of quoted some data from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which, going beyond teachers leaving, looked at principals leaving. And if you look in the data, then you can see I have an article on this that's just about to come out on the Framingham Observer, called "High Principal Turnover in the Framingham Public Schools is a Reality." And it really is. We only have 5 principals out of 13 who have substantial principal experience. 3 have 5 years of experience on the job, have been in their position for 5 years, and 2 have been there 10 years. But we have 8 who are fairly recently appointed. And I kind of came across this. Someone clued me into looking at staff retention since I was talking about teachers leaving, and I looked at that. So I want to show you a couple of graphics. So we're going to put up the first graphic here, and as you can see, this is from the DESE site, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and it looks at 2025 staffing retention rates. And that there's a bit of a tricky thing with that. I thought initially that was, when you talked about that was data relating to what happened at the end of the last school year, which was this past summer. But if you look at this data, you can see that, goodness, the thing you can focus on is principals. There's 15 of them here, and there's 15. We've got 13 schools, but a number of principals came and went in the same year. So we have 8 retained out of 15. So you say, my goodness, that's a tremendous loss of principals. And when did that happen? I thought it was happening at the end of last school year in June. What does 2025 mean? It actually means that coming into 2025, which is the prior summer, only 8 principals out of 15 survived. And so you say, okay, well, what was it in the prior year? And now we'll show the graphic of the 2024 staffing. And you see in the prior reporting in 2024, there were 14 principals. Again, there was one more than the number of schools. So we managed to retain 10, so 4 left. So this is very disturbing data. And then people were saying, well, it's not really happening, and there was a big fight on Facebook in Framingham Community and Government Chat, because whenever you publish anything that's kind of sound there, if it has any hint of being adverse to the mayor, you get attack dogs all over you. But I think that the 3,000 people in that group who simply watch and read are worth informing about what's going on. So my approach is always put the information out there. It doesn't matter if you take some incoming fire on it. So you look at that and say, well, okay, what's the deal there on the ground if I look at it from a different point of view, okay? Because people said, well, that's not true. So what I did is I went and looked at every school, Barberry, Brophy, and so on, all the way through Walsh, the 13 schools, and I looked at who's the current principal, and I made a list of that. And so in the next graphic, you can see the school, the principal, and when they were appointed. And I've bolded the ones who were appointed in the last 2 years. And in each case, I have a reference to news articles that actually confirmed that was the case. So here we are, we've got principals, we know who's there, and then we looked at when they were appointed simply by looking in the patch and the Metro West Daily News to see when they were appointed. So we have 8 principals who were appointed in the last couple of years. That means that in those years, 8 principals left. So 8 out of 13 left. We do have a loss of leadership experience in the school systems that is going on at the same time as the teachers are leaving. So teachers are leaving because of difficult classrooms, largely speaking. And the principals are seeing this, and they're trying to manage a school where all of these classrooms are having difficulty and teachers are leaving, and it's a morale problem. And thank goodness we have a bunch of principals who have hung in there and are doing a great job. But it is challenging. So a principal comes into a tranquil, easy to manage school will survive. But if there's difficulty in the school of any kind because it's being stressed by a lack of money and a lack of pre-K and lack of classroom support and late buses, the job becomes much more difficult. So visits to the principal's office from students who are disrupting class or who are upset because the bus was late and who've had a pretty frazzled time because maybe they missed breakfast as well. You've got student body that's being, stressed by late buses and by a lack of support in the classroom. They're struggling with language or with their special needs issues, and they're not getting support, and so they get a bit fractious normally. These are kids, and so teachers find that's hard, and then the principal has to deal with all of this. So the bottom line is principals are leaving, teachers are leaving, and I just wanted to straighten that out. So the crowd on Facebook, it's just 3,000 people, but there's 15,000 people going to vote in the election on November 4th, and they should know that we have a serious staffing crisis in the schools, which is very fixable if we bring back the $18 million that the Mayor took from the schools, and that will, as I've argued elsewhere, fix the problem. So now that's the teachers. So we can go along, and we can now talk about environment. And the dominant thing we find with people that we run into is that you know, the solar panels and composting are important to some, but with most people they're concerned about the state of the city. They want change. They think that there's too much developer influence. They're worried about the schools. But environmental issues are long-term and important and have a financial component. So when I served on the school committee, I remember that we were very interested in solar installations, and Fuller was planned and has a solar roof. It was going to have a solar canopy in its parking lot, but that turned out to be a problem with, there was ground contamination of some sort, so that canopy was put across in Farley. And then separately I remember the meeting where we were going to redo the parking lot at Brophy, so I suggested that we should put a canopy, a solar canopy, and that was done. And also there was a small solar roof put on the McAuliffe Library in Knobscott. So these were all done before the Mayor stepped foot in City Hall. So the question is, what happened in the last 4 years? Well, nothing happened in the last 4 years. And this is a very remarkable situation because the Mayor arrived at the start of, the election was at the end of 21. He arrived in City Hall in his office in the start of January in 2022. And then that year, in August of 2022, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed under the Biden administration. And it amazingly increased the federal credits that you would get for solar installations, because before it was the case that any company or any homeowner could install solar panels and get 30% off the cost of the panels through a federal tax credit. So if I'm earning money paying taxes, I could do a tax credit. So for my $54,000 system on my home, I got an $18,000 federal tax credit. Okay, so I got $18,000 off the cost. And then I proceeded to make $2,500 a year for the last 10 years, plus utility savings. So I've made out really well. I'm really in the black on that project. And the same is with cities. Only cities and towns aren't people who are taxed in that kind of way, so they can't get tax credits. So what they do is hire companies like Solect, who did our canopies, and they say, okay, can you come in? Solect is a business. It can take a tax credit. So you get that indirect benefit of the tax credit that way. However, when the Inflation Reduction Act passed in Charlie's first year, everything changed. The government realized this was a problem for churches and cities and towns. And so they made it so, well, if you bought the panels, they would give you a refund. It wasn't a tax credit, they actually gave you 30% of the money back. So it became much more attractive, and you'd make much more money. If I'd had Solar City rent my roof and put and they would get the benefit of the solar and then give me some, you know, money for renting the roof, I would have made $100 a month out of my solar system, but I made $200 a month about, because I owned the panels. So it became much more attractive if the city could then own the panels and get a better deal. In fact, if you look at, there was a kind of article I wrote saying Framingham Mayor rejects millions in utility savings in fiscal crisis, which is kind of basically in 24. And the difference is amazing. You know, if you buy the panels, you get over the whole term of the project, you make a profit, a net profit of 3.7 million. Whereas if you do a power purchase agreement, you get Solect in, do your canopy, they own it, but they give you benefits from owning it, you get 400,000. So the benefit was 8 times bigger. So that's why at that point, the next roof we'd done was Farley, and so Farley, you know, every new roof should have had solar on it, but we did Farley. And then in that year, there was this attempt to try and get the mayor to put a solar roof on Farley. Well, the amazing thing was Energize Framingham argued and argued and argued, and after months, I mean, this has been going on for a long time, they argued the mayor to try and get him to do something. Well, it was in May of 2024 that the mayor finally realized that there was money to be made from solar panels. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed in August of 2022 in the first year of the Sisitsky administration. So it took him till May the 7th in 2024, you know, what's that, almost 2 years later, to realize that there were actually money to be made. He seemed to be, and he admitted that he was unaware of it. So I just want to show you this clip that will show you what happened in a meeting when Energize Framingham argued for the Farley roof to be done. And so here's the clip.
So you want me to get questions from the council? I know you had a few things you want to say.
Why don't I respond to Amy?
I figured I'd give you you get to go first as the mayor. Yes,
Amy,
sir.
thank you very much. That was a great presentation. And you were right. Part of the reason for the decision I made was based on incomplete information. And I began to see the sunlight, no pun intended.
Hey, at least he figures it out.
When a while back, I spoke at the senior center, and Lori Bornstein asked me a question about the project. And I gave her an answer which I thought was the right answer, and she wasn't happy with the answer, obviously. And the more I thought about it, the more I wasn't happy with the answer. So I got together with members of the staff on a number of occasions, and we drilled down into this more and did more research on it and looked at the numbers. And first of all, I wasn't aware of the change in the federal law that allowed federal tax credits to come directly to the city. Yep. That's huge. That's about $400,000 a one-time payment, yep, which up until recently was only eligible, only private companies were eligible to get it. Yes. So that was a big change. And then in talking with Sean, I learned about the SMART program and the annual payments that we could receive from grants. So the bottom line is, I think what you said is a lot more accurate than I was thinking about the project. And, but even if we were all in agreement today to put solar panels on Farley, we still would have to bid it, and we would need to have a plan with a design and specifications and everything. So what I'm proposing to do is to find the money to begin the design work for the solar panels on Farley. And then once the design is done, because it's got to take into consideration what the future use of that building might be, how a phase 2 of the geothermal is going to impact that building, and whether or not we're going to have to replace or modernize 32-year-old rooftop units to accommodate solar panels. So all that has to be taken into consideration before we can go out to bid for solar panels. But I'm on board, and excuse me, we're going to find the money to do the design, and we will move ahead with it as quickly as we can and get this project done.
So now, you can see from that clip that the mayor was totally unaware of the financial incentives brought in by the Inflation Reduction Act, and he suddenly, the light bulb turned on, and he went and talked to Sean Lewis, who's probably one of the best sustainability coordinators around. Well, you can't tell me that the mayor shouldn't have gone to Sean Lewis on the first day of his administration and said, what can we do to make money out of solar? So it took him almost 2 years to actually talk to Sean, it seems, and find out that there was money to be made. And so we just lost, a lot of money here, because if the mayor had done this in the first year of his administration when the Inflation Reduction Act passed, we could have had 5, 10 solar canopies operational now. I went and had lunch with Solect, who do this stuff. I was over at the Stone Pub or whatever it is in Ashland, and we had lunch, and they said, well, at this point, this is earlier this year, we bought a lot of panels before the Trump tariffs came in. There's a lot of steel, so doing canopies is no problem. And they're doing 5 solar canopies in Hopkinton right now, which is why I say if I become mayor, we have till 2027. Trump killed the incentives at the end of that year. We could do 10 solar canopies in the first year and more in the next. So there was no reason at all not to do this. So I'm going on about this because there's money lost. If you scale it up from the careful study that was done on Farley, that would have reaped us $140,000 a year in utility savings, plus lowering our carbon footprint. And if we'd scaled it to the other, schools, 13 schools we have, 13 roofs, 13 parking lots, Fuller's done, canopy at Farley and at Brophy, we could have something like $2 to $3 million in savings, in utility savings every year. That's fiscal sense. So that's solar. The other thing was composting. Composting, I do composting. Many cities and towns around us do composting. And it's important because 40% of the trash stream is compostable. We pay $1.8 million for trash to be hauled out, so we could save $700,000 if we composted. So everybody else looks at the fact that there's one composting company, Black Earth Composting, that is really the only game in town. So they get them in, they kind of do an RFP, request for proposal for compost vendors, and then they turn up, they apply, and they're always the best. And so you hire them just simply to put your stamp of approval on what they're doing, and then people sign up and subscribe and get a better deal on their monthly expense to do that. So the mayor, however, didn't look at all the other cities and towns that had done that in a couple of months. He had an 18-month study going on and on and on and on. It took 6 months to do the RFP on this and took forever. So he'll run around, he's been running around claiming that we're now doing composting, but he delayed the whole thing for 18 months and was very diffident about it at the start. I could go on about solar, about trees and this and that and the other, but I want to move on to something that the final part of this show, which is really important, which is how decisions are made here. And the mayor is currently hiding problems in the schools. He's got nothing to say about environmental efforts. He is hiding the giant infrastructure problem in the city. And the thing is, why is that? It's always uncomfortable to talk about problems. And but he came in as a new mayor and could have said, these are all the problems and this is how we should deal with them. And he didn't. So he's been hiding them for 4 years. And you can't really trust the mayor on infrastructure, nor on the schools, nor even in environmental stuff, if he talks about that, nor zoning and planning. It's a matter of how you discuss things. Well, I've had a number of examples that I've learned from in my life. One wonderful one was when my son was in the 2nd grade at an elementary school. The teacher there was pretty wonderful. Whenever a student made a mistake in the class, he would stop the class and celebrate the mistake. And so he let kids know it was okay to make mistakes and be upfront about it, because when you make mistakes, you learn from it. And if you can talk about mistakes and see how did that happen, you can fix them. That's a really good culture. The other one was when I was serving on the school committee in Newton, and when I got elected, I kind of helped tip the balance of power in the school committee, and we kind of retired out a superintendent who wasn't much good. We got an interim superintendent, Jim Marini, who was just marvelous superintendent. He just finished, he was a turnaround specialist. He just finished turning around North Reading. They'd had some big problems there, and he fixed that school system. So he came in, and it was very remarkable because I was used to going in to see the superintendent on occasion, and his admin would be in the front office looking rather glum. And then when Jim was there, I came in, it was like the sun came up in the front office. The admin was happy, high, completely different approach. And that was because of Jim. Jim was as honest as the day is long, and he spent his time in Newton initially changing the culture from hiding the problem to celebrating the problem. So he would come into a room and he would say, "The truth will set you free." And he would say, "It's really uncomfortable, but once the truth's out, you can manage it." And we need the same kind of culture change here. And that is, we need to say, these are the problems, and forthrightly figure out what they are. Then you figure out what the way is to fix the problem, looking at all the data you can and getting all of the input you can. And then it's fun to go to work because you go to work to solve problems. You don't go to work to maintain excellence and pretend nothing's wrong. You go there because you actually want to do something, and we should have a culture not of hiding the problem, but of constant improvement. And that's my brand. I kind of have always done this. It's good for education, it's good for infrastructure, it's good for roads. I mean, the roads are going downhill all the time, but the mayor doesn't want to talk about that. So we're going to celebrate and enjoy problem solving. And that's what, after all, most companies are doing. It's what science is all about. Things that have been solved aren't interesting anymore. You want to be always moving on to the next problem in science or the next invention in engineering. So we want to change the culture so people are going to say, hey, we just found a problem. And yeah, it might look like we were fairly dumb the way we used to do it, but now we're going to do it better. Okay, so that's a really important thing. That's an important part of why I'm running, because I want to help change the culture. We have a lot of good people in the city who actually agree with this. They want change. They want to know what's going on. And so that's the whole point. So there we are. This is pretty much through the end of episode 4. And it's discussed, as I said, staffing turnover, environment, and then how you approach problem solving and decision making, and you kind of learn to enjoy the problem. It might sound strange, but actually that's the way most problems are solved, by people who actually enjoy it. After all, if you're the Celtics, your big problem is getting the ball down the other end of the court. And you know, if you enjoy doing that and you enjoy the battle of being on a court, then you can have a good time. And that's why teams do well when they have spirit that helps them in adversity. And we're in a somewhat adverse situation, so we need to get our spirits in the right shape so we can say, okay, well, there's a lot of trouble, but we can actually fix it. So that's the story for today. And I hope that on November 4th, or actually early voting starts not too far from now, if you want a whole fresh approach to government, and you'll know what's going on and then how we fix it, and then you'll be part of the solution, because I'm not going to fix all these things. You are, with me and all the city staff. So again, this is Geoff Epstein signing off on episode 4 of What's Ahead for Framingham. Thanks for watching.